All right. It's genetic, by the way. My father looks 12. Just get older, you get younger.
Actually, you speak louder.
Yeah, sure. With this. So I'm also from London, but London, Canada. You probably didn't know there was London, Canada. Don't worry. And that's where I grew up. It's a small city, and it was probably 99.9% WASP, which means White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. So I went to a high school with 1,000 kids, and I was the only Jewish kid there. Now, I'm bringing this up because my sense of Jewish identity, since we're talking about Jewish and Buddhist identity, is probably very different from most people in this room. It's when I was in Swan Mok, which is this Buddhadasa, Ajahn Buddhadasa's temple in South Thailand. I was there for a while, and I asked the abbot, I was already thinking about my research, and I asked him, why are there so many Jews involved in Buddhism? Because it really was big. I mean, out of 2% in the U.S., they make up about 30% of the Buddhists there, or the white Buddhists. And that was really louder. Okay. So, is that okay? Yeah, I'll just like swallow this thing. My hara. Okay. Let's try it. And he said to me, we were sitting in the forest there, being eaten by mosquitoes. He didn't flinch though. I was the one slapping them. And he said to me, because they're smart and they know suffering. And I know the first one was to flatter me, but the second one was actually quite true. It brought me back to my upbringing, which, as a real outsider, an insider and outsider of that society in Canada, it involved a lot of suffering. My Jewish identity was not, it didn't matter if you were Orthodox or not, or religious or not. Religious secular was not a division there. It was Jewish, non-Jewish. I mean, there's religious secular, you're happy to meet another Jew. It doesn't matter whether they're religious or not. I mean, in this town, there weren't any religious Jews. But we carried a common suffering. What was that? It was a sense of alienation. It was a sense of always being pointed out to you that you're Jewish by your fellow students and your teachers and your society. Whether it's my looking outside on Christmas morning at all the kids running outside with their toys and I'm sitting at home wondering what's on TV, or getting actual, anti-Semitic discrimination and violence at school, which happened. And most people here don't experience that because, you are a majority where you are. And so my sense of Jewish identity always had that kind of yoke of suffering attached to it, just sort of existential. And yet it wasn't something I could rid myself of. It's the strange thing about Judaism, you can convert to be a Jew, but it's almost impossible to convert not to be a Jew. You can not be religious, you can be Buddhist, you can be Hindu, you can even be Christian, but you're still Jewish. There's something there that's stuck to you. It's your karma. Good karma, bad karma, I don't know. But it's sometimes heavy karma. So, and it involved me when I started to become more involved in Buddhism with this sort of struggle, right? What do I do with this karma? Like, does it interfere? Does it not interfere? And there's this Zen koan. There are these sort of riddles that teachers and students, they're passed down as a teaching device from sort of ancient Chinese Buddhism. And one of them goes like this. It's about mountains and rivers. It says, before I started studying Zen, I saw mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers. And then after studying Zen for 20 years, I saw mountains are not mountains and rivers are not rivers. All is one. And then I continued studying, and after another 20 years of studying, I saw, yes, mountains were mountains and rivers were rivers again. And I feel that's sort of a journey that I'm taking with Judaism and Buddhism, in a sense of, seeing them as very different. And when I started going to college, I was in Montreal, and I had this Chinese girlfriend she was a Chinese Buddhist, like from birth. So, she didn't because of that, she didn't need to do meditation. All right. They just gave food to the altar, and she was Torah. So, she was lucky. But I always had this sense of, I would try to talk with her to process this struggle I was going through. Is it okay that Jewish and Buddhist has work? She looked at me like I was an alien and just said, what's your problem? For her, there was no problem. There was no problem. A Jew would automatically understand the problem, and not because of your religious observance or not, just because of this sort of sticky identity that seems to get in the way with a lot of things. Or it kind of paves your way. So it was there, and it had to be dealt with, or not dealt with. And there was that teacher I met when I was traveling around staying in some centers. Her name is Jacqueline Mandel. She was with the original group of people who were practicing and brought Vipassana with Jack Morville and Sharon Salzberg and who else? Joseph Goldstein. So there's Jacqueline Mandel also. And then she went to the West Coast. And she said when she did her first retreat, it was such a relief. She was a daughter of Holocaust survivors, and she said it was such a relief to hear someone sit down and say there is suffering. Because her family wouldn't mention that word. They couldn't talk about it. There was something in the Jewish sort of gene that had a lot to do with denial. Right? There was a lot of denial and repression there, and then a lot of anger and fear, and everything was unspoken. So to bring out of the closet, the suffering aspect that is so kind of inherent in a Jewish identity. And Stephen was talking about it sometimes in terms of icons, that we carry these icons deep inside of us. And it can be oppressive. But there is this saying also in Buddhism, or at least in Zen I know, is, turn your obstacles into your path. And so when we meet deep suffering, or pain, or repression, or denial, or something like that, and you're sitting with it, you observe it. You want to pay attention, because it's there to teach you something. And that takes practice, though, right? That takes, because our sort of Jewish or knee-jerk reaction is deny or look away or do something else. And when I was in Wat Pananachat, it was funny, I didn't know that any of the monks were Jewish. And I was there, it must have been, anyways, this is years ago. And it was Rosh Hashanah. It was Rosh Hashanah there. And I said, I can't let this go by without anything going on. There's something, there's this urge I needed to do something and see who's going to respond. So I got some, they didn't have apples there, so I got some bananas. And they did have honey. So I got bananas and honey, and I was in a little kuti, which is a little hut in the forest. And I kind of spread the word to some of these monks, just a few of them that I thought maybe were Jewish, or one I knew was from Israel, so he'll come. I said, we're going to do bananas and honey, so come before the morning meditation, at 2:30. And all of a sudden, 9 guys show up in my kuti, out of 22. And we're sitting in and it's just silent. It's just silent. We were just kind of in shock that we're doing this. But there was something I felt cathartic, right? Cathartic about not needing to deny. You can be shaven-headed and robed, and if you're just acknowledging something, it's like acknowledging, and the reason I was getting to this sense of Jewish identity that I was growing up with, and not being religious or non-religious, is more like having green eyes and brown hair, and being Jewish. That's how I was born. So what is there to deny? Am I going to deny that I have green eyes? No. What point would that serve, other than to involve me in a lifelong struggle trying to deny something that's there. So I felt that there was a sort of catharsis in the kuti, in the little shack on stilts, that finally we could just acknowledge something real simple. It's a simple acknowledgement. And that simple acknowledgement just allows the denial to be released a little bit. Okay, it's I would say similar to acknowledging in your zazen, in your silent meditation, acknowledging something that's happening, a difficulty or a pain. You acknowledge it, right? You don't need to go into it. Like when we're dipping the banana in the honey, we weren't going into all of our Jewish stories. Like that wasn't the point. It was just a simple acknowledgement of part of this karma or identity that we carry with us. And that was enough. That was enough. In the same way that when you're sitting and you feel something really intense, you acknowledge it, but you don't need to, you don't want to run into sort of an analysis about where it comes from, why it is, whatever. You know, the Buddha has this story about which Nikaya is, one of the Nikayas, when you're shot with, he was asked actually about like how the world was created. And he gave the simile of someone being shot with an arrow. And you've probably heard it already. You know, if the person is shot with an arrow, is he going to ask, before it's taken out, where's the wood from, where the feathers come from, who shot it, what clan is he in, what village is he from, on and on and on, until he dies of blood loss, trying to figure out all about, you know, the quality of the bow, all this stuff. That analysis may have its time, but when you're suffering, you know, he said, I teach suffering and the end of suffering. That's what I'm concerned with. Okay, so in a sense, questions about Judaism and God and all the sort of contradictions we may find in our own identities fall away when we face our suffering. Right? They kind of fall to the side. That's not a denial. That's just saying, well, let's deal with priorities. So there's like a practical dharma that we're dealing with, and we're trying to, you know, relieve suffering. And then there are all the identities that, well, in the face of suffering, become a little lighter, right? Become less heavy. That karma becomes less heavy when you're focusing on the real relief of suffering. So that's sort of coming back to seeing mountains and mountains and rivers and rivers. There's in Mahayana Buddhism, they talk about the two truths. There's like a relative truth and an ultimate truth. And the relative truth are all the identities we have, you know, all the seemingly contradictions and paradoxes and different forms, and like what Stephen was talking about with, you know, the things seem differently. We seem separate. And the ultimate truth is that it's not, that there is an emptiness there. But can you live in that emptiness while you're trying to drink your glass of water? Is it helpful? It's not so much can you live in there, but does that enable you to drink the water? I mean, probably in that moment, no. Right? So does it enable you, being in emptiness, to drive down the street and avoid hitting the cars? No. Okay. So you're dealing with relative truth. And you're kind of going back and forth and not having to have them compete. Not saying that this one is greater than that one. That, yes, ultimate truth is the ultimate. Well, maybe so. But Suzuki Roshi was always saying, not necessarily so. Not necessarily so. Things may be true. They may not be true. Okay? But not necessarily so. Meaning, sometimes yes, sometimes not. Okay? Skillful means is to know when to relate to each thing skillfully, you know, accordingly, appropriately. Right, so when do I relate to Judaism appropriately? And when do I relate to Dharma appropriately? Okay, when's the right thing to do the right thing and do it naturally? So the practice is always coming back to sort of a naturalness in dealing with these things. And that's the mountains and rivers coming back after much time. And the reason I gave that koan in the beginning is because whoever wrote it, or it's attributed to, talk about after 20 years of practice and after another 20 years of practice, and we want answers now. Okay. We come here. I want to know how to unite Judaism and Buddhism this morning. It's not necessarily going to happen. You know, you might find yourself even more irritated. when you leave this room. Maybe, but not necessarily so. Okay, depends on your expectations, which we can do another meditation and you can look at them. But in the Diamond Sutra, there's a quote where the Buddha says, Subhuti, what is called Buddha Dharma is everything that is not Buddha Dharma. Okay, and that's a great quote, because sometimes we're very attached to the difference between Judaism and Buddhism, and we want to somehow see how they fit. Like two puzzle pieces that in my life I want them to fit. You know what? Maybe they do fit, but not side by side, right? What if the whole self is like this puzzle, and instead of Judaism, your Jewish identity, and Buddhist, whatever it is, I hesitate to say identity because it's kind of trying to do the opposite, your Buddhist practice. Maybe there are puzzle pieces, but there's like 3 or 4 other puzzle pieces in between them. And when you fit those together, then the whole thing fits together. Instead of this effort that we're always trying to make these two fit together, what if we just relax that and let them fit together naturally over the course of a lifetime? You know, and not have to, I'm going to make them fit. Then we're going to start distorting them. And that's when we get some sort of fusion that doesn't really respect Judaism or Dharma. We're trying to fuse one into the other. And that's why if I were to use a metaphor, I mean, we have a mountain, but I'm thinking about a hybrid. I don't have a hybrid car. I'd like to have one. I'd like to have an electric car. But a hybrid is works on gas and then switches to battery and then switches to gas. I don't think, I may be wrong, I'm not a techno person, but I don't think it uses battery and gas at the same time. If it does, my metaphor is gone. But let's just pretend they don't. Let's pretend they don't. But like it's the same car, and you're driving down the path. Which path is it? Is it Jewish or Buddhist? You know what? It's your life. That's your path. Okay? There's a koan where it says, you know, the koan is you. Alright? So what you're really trying to figure out is not Judaism and Buddhism. You're trying to figure out your path in life, how to suffer less and love more. So when you're driving on your path, right, is Judaism helping you achieve that? Is Buddhism helping you achieve that? Is switching from battery to gas helping you achieve that? Yeah. So if you keep going, if you keep driving, then yeah. If you find yourself stuck, then maybe switch to the battery or switch to the gas. Yeah. But does it really matter which one as long as you keep going on that path? It's up to you. So, I mean, I'll give you a couple more personal disclosures. My family is Orthodox. Not the family I grew up with, like Stephen, but actually the family that I've chosen. Right? My wife and my children are Orthodox. My wife is Orthodox. My children go to religious schools. And I wouldn't define myself that way, but I don't know whether I call it a mixed marriage because I kind of obey the house rules. So I practice the yoga of flexibility. But I come to appreciate sort of the discipline and the commitment in the path that she's chosen, and even though I don't necessarily choose it for myself. And I honor it, and I see that, you know, my children are influenced by having a meditation room in the house and seeing me sit every morning and, you know, with the Buddha and with the, you know, my Dharma stuff. So they know what I do. It's no secret. But their teachers don't. And nobody should tell them. Otherwise we're looking for another school. But I'm seeing it more and more as a sense of, you know, having to be responsible for your own life. And then, you know, you'll influence for the good. And Suzuki Roshi, he has this, his metaphor, one of the times he used the metaphor of brown rice. He says brown rice is just right. And most people go for white rice because it's really easy to eat. But brown rice is a bit more difficult. And he said, it's just right because you have to really chew. Okay, you have to chew well. You can't just be oblivious. And when you're really chewing well, someone asked him, how do you like Zazen? And that question could have been, how do you like Buddhism, or how do you like Judaism? It was like this big question. They're always asking, what is the way? And they always give an answer like, the tree outside. What they're saying is that these big questions, well, they're asking you, do they help you? Does the big question really help you? Does it really help you? Or is it more, how am I chewing my brown rice? So that's how he related the question. He said Zazen is too big a topic. Zazen is sitting meditation and Zen. Zazen is too big a topic. Brown rice is just right. And he said, actually, there's not much difference. Because if you're really eating brown rice, okay, if you're really chewing it, okay, and that's all you're doing, then something in your experience, in your awareness, opens up. What is it? Eating brown rice. Do you need to explain yourself or express it to others? No. It's your sense of being in this moment. And so whether it's brown rice, or whether it's a prayer, or whether it's a blessing, or whether it's a sitting, or whether it's a breath, that's your brown rice. So take brown rice as everything you do, and everything you chew. If you're really doing it fully, something opens up. What is it? Well, do you need to tell me? No, that's your responsibility. And the other koan, and I'll end with this. One other thing about the struggle. I wrote this when I was wandering around trying to find practice centers in India. One of my teachers, Thupten Shodran, and she was here a few times. She's also Jewish. And I wrote her this long letter saying, what am I going to do? Kind of like to the girlfriend I had. And she wrote back this long, compassionate letter, which could be summarized by, don't worry about it. And then I had this interview with Lama Zopa, who's the head of the monastery and the lineage there in Prabhupada. And there are a couple other people also having meetings with him. And I asked him, again, this question that was really, the struggle was there, still with me. And I asked him about Judaism, Buddhism, and, how do they work together? And he has these dice. He has these dice made of bones. And he took them out, and he started rolling these dice. It's some sort of almost shamanistic thing, kind of magical oracle type of thing that he was doing. And when other people asked him questions, he rolled the dice like one surprise, gave them the answer. He must have rolled those dice for 10 minutes. I was on the edge of my seat. I thought I was going to die, and I wouldn't know. He rolled those dice and rolled those dice. And after, it seemed like forever to me. Maybe it was 5 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity. And finally he stopped and looked at me and said, Judaism, Buddhism, they're both okay. I walked out of the room there, and the woman who also had asked the question, she kind of like consolingly put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Is that the answer you're hoping for?" I was too lost to reply. But I also read recently the Dalai Lama was asked a similar thing. He was in the middle of a talk. Someone came up and said, "What about God?" And he looked around, and I think there were a couple of others, like an interfaith discussion, and there was a couple of other religious, like sort of Abrahamic or theistic people beside him, and he put his arm and said, "Well, leave that up to us. You just learn how to live in peace." I think that's the sort of practical view is coming back to mountains and rivers, and brown rice, is saying like The big questions when you're lying awake at night, you can't fall asleep. If that's what you want to think about to get you back to sleep, then think about those things. But we're always asking the question, I think, more practically in a spiritual life, whether it's Judaism or Buddhism, like, how do I open my heart and my mind to this moment? You know, how am I going to open my heart and mind fully to this moment and to all those within it? And whatever practice you're doing, right, if you're really chewing it, you know, chewing that rice, I mean, making the raw food cooked, then you're probably going to move ahead. It's probably going to happen. And I think that's kind of our koan. So the last koan I'll leave you with is the one called the 100-foot or 100-meter pole. I guess 100 feet is 30 meter. Let's keep it 100. The 100-meter pole makes it more precarious. So the question the koan asked is, when you get to the top of a 100-meter pole, what do you do? The koan before that, actually, in the series, is that there's this monk who's hanging by a tree with his teeth. And hanging, and someone comes under him and asks him the Dharma question. He has to answer. That's his job. But if he answers, he falls. What does he do? So, what do you do when you get to the top of a 100-foot pole? The answer, of course, is jump. But the point of these koans is to invite into our mind and hearts a paradox that is, you know, that can't be resolved. A paradox that we just don't know what to do with. So what do? We jump, or we leave it, or we come back to it later and think about it some more. Okay? And it'll be there waiting for you. Judaism and Buddhism and whatever conflicts and struggles you have, they'll be there waiting for you. You know, probably in a few years from now. Definitely when you walk out this morning. And, you know, do you open your mouth and fall? And, or do you jump off the pole and go for it? Say yes to this moment? Both of them are probably right, if that's the one you choose. And that's kind of where we're at. A paradox that we live with constantly. Things that don't necessarily fit, that somehow, in the same way that we have all these different people, you know, do they all fit? Yes, no, maybe, not necessarily. Yeah. So, with that, enjoy your morning.